So the Las Vegas Raiders did absolutely everything they could to try and lose the number one overall draft pick today against the Houston Texans. But fortunately, the Raiders lost this game, which was absolutely meaningless. But there are some major positives to take away. We're going to get into that right now. But also the New York Giants lost their game as well, which means if the season were to end today, the Giants would have the number one overall draft pick. But would they take a quarterback? Well, we don't know. It is possible that they could have already given up on Jackson Dart, but that would be stupid of them to give up on this young man so soon when he really doesn't have a good enough team around him to really see if he is their future or not. So I think that the likely outcome is if the Giants end up with the number one overall draft pick, that they will trade back to pick 7, 8, 9, 10 and take some future draft picks as well, maybe an additional player or two, and they will go for some key players in other positions, which would mean they would be trading for a team that needs a quarterback and wants a Fernando Mendoza. Again, he's my number one overall draft pick. I think he is going to be the man in the NFL. So moving forward into next week, the Raiders will be playing the Giants, and whoever loses that game will pretty much guarantee that they have the number one overall draft pick, because I don't see the Raiders beating the Chiefs. Even if Patrick Mahomes isn't playing, still it's the Chiefs and the Raiders are terrible. But they did play really good in spurts in this game, but then petered out in other spots. So I want to talk about some of the things that the Raiders did really well today, which is a good sign for the future if the Raiders can get Fernando Mendoza at the number one overall draft pick to have our future quarterback for the next 10 plus years. Here's the thing that is best out of this entire scenario, which is Maxx Crosby. Even though it's a meaningless game, even though the Raiders need to lose these games in order to get a quarterback of the future, Maxx Crosby is an absolute beast. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about him, is he just never quits and never gives up. Whether he's injured, whether we're losing, he just goes out there and is an absolute game wrecker. Another thing that I seen today that spells well for the future of the Raiders is the fact that when you look at Ashton Jeanty, when he has a running lane, this dude is going to be a phenomenal running back. He makes it really difficult for other players to bring him down on an opposite team. He showed that on several plays today, and I think that this is his rookie year. He's only going to mature and get better as a runner, but the Raiders need to address that offensive line, and we got to get it healthy, and it's got to be at least a top 10 offensive line, really, for Ashton Jeanty to reach his peak level. Despite the fact that the Raiders have had one of the worst, if not the worst, offensive lines in the NFL, Ashton Jeanty has had a really good rookie season, despite the fact that he gets hit in the backfield 98% of the time, whereas other running backs don't have to face that type of a challenge. So I think moving forward, the Raiders are going to have a really good run game, especially if you can get that quarterback of the future settled and you can get that offensive line figured out moving forward. The other thing that I really was impressed by is obviously Brock Bowers. This guy is by far one of the best, if not the best tight ends in football right now, despite the fact that he is on a terrible team and has a terrible quarterback. He still is a mismatch every single time he lines up and goes out there for a route. Whether you're trying to cover him with a linebacker, he's too fast. If you're trying to cover him with a safety or even a corner, he is too big. And he is just really good. He has such body control to come down. Listen, he's going to be going into his third year next year. And if we get a quarterback in an offensive line that can protect that quarterback and we can get the run game going, I think that you have a possibility of seeing Brock Bowers having a breakout year like he did with his rookie year, maybe even surpassing those numbers. That, again, is going to spell really well for the Raiders moving forward. The fact that you would have your own version of a Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce with the Raiders, if they can go out and get Fernando Mendoza, would really help this team to start getting into playoff contentions and maybe even making some Super Bowl runs. So with that, I don't think it was all bad this year, even though the Raiders are tied for one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I say that because for the first time in a very long time, the Raiders have an opportunity to get a franchise quarterback. And as long as they don't blow it by winning that game next week against the Giants, the Raiders could be set up for multiple years to come. I have been one since I started this show to say I'm not going to sell out on a rookie quarterback until I really see what they can do in the NFL. But there's been times where I've said this guy is going to be a star, whether it was a quarterback or at another position. Jayden Daniels was one that I was saying this guy is going to be an absolute star. And I also said that Caleb Williams is going to be a star, but I didn't want him on the team simply because we didn't have a team set up for him, and his quirks and his issues with, the painted fingernails and the crybaby stuff and all of that he showed in college, as well as some inconsistency. I wasn't sure how he would pan out. Well, he's panning out pretty darn well with the Bears now that he has a real head coach, Ben Johnson, the guy that we were supposed to get, that the deal was apparently done and then he backed out of. That is something that I said, listen, Caleb is going to be a really good quarterback in the NFL, but I think Jayden's going to be a superstar. Well, it looks like both of them are becoming superstars now. I think the same thing with Fernando Mendoza. I think this dude will be a Josh Allen for the Raiders. I think he's going to be a superstar. I think the Raiders will win a bunch of games with him. But again, it all does come back down to the fact that you have to have an offensive line. So after the Raiders draft Fernando Mendoza, if we get that number 1 overall draft pick and it doesn't end up slipping through the cracks and we miss out on him, then the second and third round, again, you have to double down on the trenches. And I think you've just got to really build up for that offensive line in the future. I don't think we need a whole lot there. I think Kolton Miller needs to get back to being healthy. I think JPJ needs to get back to being healthy, and he needs to be at the center. And I think that with Grant, we're doing pretty good. And I think that it's going to be a competition at that right tackle. The main issue is really going to be that left guard position next year. So the Raiders, I think, should draft another tackle in the second round, and I think that they should draft another guard in the third round. This is really going to help to solidify the depth that we need at the offensive line section. And then in the fourth, in the fifth, in the sixth, and the seventh round, you can go, skill positions. You can go a wide receiver. You could go defensive line. You could go corner. That's really going to depend on what players we end up bringing back, which ones we let go. But this year, absolutely, it needs to be offensive line and quarterback, end, full stop. That's it. And then the Raiders should have a winning season next year. Also, we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen with our head coaching situation. Will Coach be back, or will we be musical chairs for the coaching once again? We don't know, but we will find out here in just a couple of weeks if Coach Pete Carroll will be keeping his job or if he will be shown the door.